are the British Museum Youth Collective, and we are very proud to present to you our spring event entitled Museum Careers Through the Keyhole. We wanted to look behind the scenes at the different kinds of jobs that are available to people in museums.
I am an assistant collection manager in the Middle East department, which basically means that I assist with the care and access of the collections. So that kind of involves kind of moving objects around the galleries and kind of maybe packing for loan, or kind of maybe couriering objects we haven't actually gone anywhere yet because of COVID, but theoretically kind of like nationally or internationally, just help with the kind of maintenance of the kind of stores and the galleries, and help install exhibitions and displays. So it's pretty varied really. It's quite kind of a technical, practical role, which I suppose surprised me when I started, because that's not really where I saw myself going, but it's really, really good fun.
I am the assistant to the British Museum's International Training Programme. The ITP's goal is to develop and sustain a network of these museum workers and kind of facilitate the sharing of knowledge and sort of skills and experiences. So we're essentially a platform for people from all different countries around the world and sort of diverse institutions to exchange ideas and skills.
I'm a project manager in the International Engagement Department. So the International Engagement Department's a commercial department where we sell and tour British Museum exhibitions to other venues around the world. So they could be other museums, sometimes they're art venues that don't have collections of their own. So when I first started working in museums, my first job was at the Science Museum, and I was an explainer at the Science Museum, but I was also doing some internships and volunteering alongside. And then I got a job in 2012 as the administrator in the International Engagement team. And then I worked at the BM for a couple of years. Then I went back to the Science Museum and worked in their kind of version of international engagement there. And then I came back to the British Museum as a project manager in 2017. So I've worked at the British Museum twice, not in the same role, but in the same team.
My role at the museum is training project coordinator collection. And what that means is that I am responsible for ensuring that staff who work directly with the collection material receive all the training they need to do excellently in their roles.
I am the Museum Futures trainee at the British Museum, and what I spend my time doing basically is it's a very digital-based role. I am with the Samsung Digital Discovery Center team, and our main aims and objective is to create these activities that we call virtual visits that aim to educate young people through interactive, educational, and above all fun digital segments. And I'm basically the admin guy for that. I get together the reports and all the statistics of all the people who've come in, all the number of students we've had participate in these sessions, collating all those stats, putting them into reports that can be sent to Samsung.
I actually have two roles at the museum. My main role is within the exhibitions department as an exhibitions assistant. And my other role is as curator in the members room. So the first of those, our department is responsible for planning and delivering the Bloomsbury exhibitions projects. So that's the planning, the project management side, as well as the design and the production. So in that role, I work with the project managers and I support them on various project tasks. So I suppose that, it varies a lot at different times of the project. Exhibitions are planned a number of years ahead. So it's very different depending on what stage of the project we're at. It could be things like reviewing exhibition proposals or obtaining rights for images and music that gets used in an exhibition. And then during the install itself, things like coordinating security lists and tracking alarms and putting labels in cases, things like that. So it's very varied. And then as curator of the members room, that involves acting as the curator and the project lead for single case displays in the British Museum members room. So I suppose again, that's things like researching objects and writing texts, and then also planning schedules and kind of liaising and coordinating with all the different departments who would help with something like that. So teams like actions management and conservation and design, and just kind of ensuring all the working parts are sort of fitting together essentially, and that the display is opened on time and within budget. So I've been working at the museum for 3 and a bit years, and I've had, in that time, I've had 3 different roles. So the first of these wasn't actually working for the museum. I was working as a contractor on the service desk, and I was working with engineers to sort of schedule various maintenance jobs across the museum. And then my first role working for the museum was as an events assistant, and that kind of involved planning and delivering internal events, sort of fundraising events for the patrons, things like that, and then also working with the museum's corporate supporters as well. And then the next role I did is my current role, so as exhibitions assistant. So I've moved around a little bit, which has been interesting, and it's been useful, I think, as well. I've had different experience from different places, working in different places at the museum.
Well, in this current role, I've been with the ITP for about 18 months. It's my first full-time role in a museum. But before this, I did work part-time at the British Museum in the museum stewarding programme. When I started when I was at university about 5 years ago, and it was a perfect role really because it was kind of shift work, so I could structure my shifts around my studies, basically around my lectures. And what I was doing was helping with the museum's events and conferences, which it runs mostly in the evenings, but also runs conferences throughout the day. So I would be helping with the guests arriving at the museum, making sure they know where to go, and helping with the setup and sort of breakdown of the events before and after. And that was really good. It sort of helped me sort of get an understanding of working in a museum. And because it was part-time, I could kind of keep that going while I was doing other things, like doing university and then doing other work as well. And it sort of helped me to sort of realize I wanted to work in museums full time.
Loads of different things. I wanted to be an archaeologist at some point because, like, you know, all kids love Indiana Jones. Then at some point I wanted to be an astronaut.
When I first graduated, I knew I wanted to be in the arts very broadly, but initially I wanted to work in music event production, and I did work in that capacity for a while as a freelancer. It was really interesting, but I suppose personally at that time being freelance wasn't right for me, I think.
What I wanted to be when I was younger had nothing to do with museums. I wanted to be an author, and that's still a dream in the back of my mind. I've always wanted to be a writer, to tell stories and craft stories. I still want to do that. I also want to make a living, so I went to do business in college, and that introduced me to business administration, which I really love because I just enjoy being able to provide structure to things. And so that in turn led me to a few internships that led me to this traineeship.
I wanted to be a high-flying city investment banker with the suits and the cars and the money. But instead I decided on heritage. So gradually, I think my career ideas changed for the better.
When I was younger, I mean, it depends how far back you go. I remember I wanted to be an author for a while. I wanted to write books, and I was quite into writing.
I went through several different prospective careers. I started off when I was little. I wanted to be a fashion designer. And then I wanted to do kind of historical consultancy for film and TV. And then I realized that is a freelance position and I probably need a PhD and I need to be an expert in something. And I was like, nah, that seems like quite a lot of work. And then I wanted to go into theatre marketing. that proved really difficult to get into because I love musical theatre and all that kind of dramatic stuff. And then I went to uni and kind of suddenly fell into museums, and I'm really pleased that I did.
At the start, it wasn't for any noble reasons. It wasn't about, I want to preserve collections and stuff like that. The first museum role I ever learned about and discovered was this traineeship. I volunteered at this youth charity called Fitzrovia Youth in Action. And after I left school, I was unemployed for a little while, and they pointed out this traineeship to me. So I applied. I made it to the final stages of the interview, but I didn't get it. So I went away, did a load of other positions throughout the next year, and then year 2 rolled around, and it was everything I'm doing now. So I thought I'd apply again, and here I am. And ever since that, I've just found such a love for like cultural heritage and the museum sector, and it is definitely somewhere I can see myself working in the future.
The period of time when I realised I wanted to work in the heritage sector and specifically within museums was actually when I was working abroad. I spent a few years working across the globe. I spent time in Canada, in France, in Portugal, in the United States. And no matter where I was, on my days off, I would always gravitate to the local heritage sites or the local museums. It really showed me that no matter where I was, there was this sort of universal interest of mine in the work of museums and the stories they had to present. So when I came back to the UK, I started looking, seeing if there was something that I could get into in that area. And that's when I stumbled across, very fortuitously, the Museum Pathways scheme. When I applied, having come off of the Museum Pathways scheme, then applying for an assistant collection manager role, an ACM role, I didn't need any qualifications for that. And that's actually something that the British Museum really excels at. That on their job adverts, they don't require a degree for their assistant collection manager roles, and a lot of museums still do. So the key thing for the ACM role, for applying for that job, was being able to demonstrate that I had practical experience. Now, obviously, we can't conjure up practical experience of museum work, and so it was all about volunteering for local museums. Have you spent time with your local heritage organisation, getting that practical experience, those practical skills that meant you would be able to do the role of an assistant collection manager well. Then after that, moving more into learning and development, I got in because of my well-placed balance between collection knowledge and learning and development knowledge. However, I am actually now pursuing a CIPD qualification as a sort of certification to cement my experience in learning and development, and that is a qualification that I will need going forwards.
What attracted me to this position was that qualifications were not needed. It was literally this gateway into the museum sector for people who have not gone to uni or have not gotten any of those experiences. I don't take very well to the education system as we have now. So I found that attractive at this traineeship. It has no endpoint assessments like apprenticeships do, and it has no exams. And while I am building towards a diploma, it's all evidence-based and built up on the work that I do throughout the year.
I think because I already had this part-time role at the British Museum, I think it certainly helped me to get this full-time one because I already had some experience within the institution.
No specific qualifications, I would say. I mean, my current role it's not a technical role in that there's no kind of specific exam that you would sit to do it or anything. And I think different backgrounds would very much be welcomed. But I suppose having IT and office skills would be very helpful, specifically around projects. And that was something that I got from working as a freelancer previously. And I think having good communication skills is really important, and being able to demonstrate that would be something that employers would be looking for a role in exhibitions. You have to communicate with people at all different levels in many different capacities, and I think that's one of the most important things. And I think also being able to demonstrate an understanding and appreciation of museums and exhibitions themselves, and kind of some knowledge of how they work.
I did a modern history degree, and at the time, like after graduating, I was super worried because everywhere, when you look on kind of job application sites and whatnot, they all say we want a museum, like an MA in museum studies, and obviously I didn't have that. But I don't necessarily think that a degree is necessary to kind of do the job that I'm doing. A lot of the time, it will say on job specifications like, oh, we would like a BA in this or an MA in that. But really, it's such a practical and technical job. I think what's most important is to just kind of get the kind of practical and technical experience. I don't think a degree is really a substitute for that. And there's so many kind of really good online resources, kind of from English Heritage and from the Collections Trust, that even if you can't kind of get that practical experience, you can kind of get a theoretical understanding of it, and you can kind of understand the skills and understand the principles of kind of, in my case, collections care, to kind of complement and supplement the kind of the qualifications or experience that you already have. So I don't think anyone should really be kind of put off by when you see the job application forms. There's all these kind of like 101 different things they expect you to have.
Because we're a commercial department in the museum, being able to deal with clients in a sort of in an appropriate way is a really important part of the job. And the international engagement managers in my department, who are really responsible for negotiating those contracts and marketing the material, they're split into like geographical regions depending on their skill sets and languages and things like that. So having a second language when you're dealing with, you know, international partners is useful. When I first started, they're like, here are your keys. And there was like a key that was like this big. And I was just like, no, you're joking. We don't have like a little swipe to, like, you know, to get into the museum. They're like, no, this is your key. And it was like this big. And I don't even collect my keys anymore. I don't think I have a set of keys. But it had like a stamp on it that said like 12 shilling reward or something like that. It was that old. It was so old. I wish I knew what number it was now. Because the key that I got given when I came back was a newer key, but this was like a key off a film to like open a castle door.
I always say that the thing that surprised me the most about the British Museum has been the people. From my first day, just from the attire that people wear to their attitudes and the fact that they're less conservative than I thought they'd be, and actually really in tune to all the things that are happening in the world, like all the BP stuff and Black Lives Matter, all that stuff was always at the forefront of their minds and always a discussion point that they allowed me to have, and my supervisors as well, are wonderful people. So the people are always the things that surprised me the most about the British Museum.
I thought at least that museums was full of kind of really posh, kind of stuffy academics, and I never saw anyone kind of popular culture. Look at night at the museum, like it's full of like old white men with big hair and glasses, and they're all mad and crazy and wonderful. But I didn't think there was going to be people like me working in the museum. And then I came here, and there are incredible, amazing, wonderful academics, and they're all brilliant and they're all so lovely. But then there's also just like loads of other kids just like me, basically. And everyone is so friendly and kind of creative and progressive and social. And I was really worried when I started that everything was going to be really serious and really stuffy. And no, everyone's just here having fun. That's just really helpful to know that don't be intimidated by museums, or don't think that they're not for you, because invariably there'll be loads of people who are just like your friends there. And I've met incredible friends here, and like I think they'll be friends for life, and that's great. Not something I expected, really.
experience, which is a bit of a double-edged sword because I literally did say the traineeship required no experience, but I was still fresh out of college, and I didn't go to uni or anything like that, and I didn't really have a job before that, so I was very much fresh-faced, doe-eyed, just coming into the space trying to make a good impression with what little qualifications I had. While I did make it to the final interview, like I said, it all boiled down to, again, not having that experience or that drive. And while I have found it in the year that went past, it wasn't that at the start. That made it a real struggle to get into the position.
You have roles advertised as entry-level roles, but you really do need some experience along with that. They do expect some experience. I remember applying for so much, everything that had like assistant after it, or, you know, everything that looked like an entry-level role that didn't pay much. I was like, okay, yeah, this is good. And I had, because I was volunteering a lot, I had quite like broad experience. So I was like, okay, I'll do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Just wanted a job. But I think there are a few industries that are like this, where I think museums still have this kind of, there's a certain type of people that work in museums. They have this kind of elite sort of tag. So the museum kind of like never escapes this cycle of having people from relatively affluent backgrounds and like not very diverse backgrounds working there, because they've been able to afford to do the free work to get into the museum in the first place.
The biggest barrier has been my lack of academic qualifications. Now, I do have a fairly decent foundation. I studied up to A-level, achieved my A-levels. However, I never went to university and never got a degree. And one thing that is very antiquated in the museum sector is the expectation that all staff members will be at least degree qualified, if not master's level qualified. And I do believe that is very antiquated. In many cases, I've spent many days training master's students who are gleefully swinging pots around by their handles, or picking up the blades of swords in order to better see the handle. So for me, that is a big barrier that I faced when first getting into museums. And I managed to get around that by focusing on my practical experience, practical skills when going into the very collection-based, collection-focused roles. I think there is still work to be done. A lot of museums, even nationals in London, are still putting up barriers in the form of expectations that you'll have a degree. And I think that is something that needs to be challenged by those of us working in the museum heritage sector to challenge that. And so hopefully I hope to see that improve in the next few years.
For me, lack of kind of careers guidance was a barrier. For most people, it's the sheer amount of volunteering you have to do to even get a foot in the door.
The really difficult thing is that the jobs don't come up all that often. You know, you can keep an eye on job boards for a long time, and there may not be. If you, I wanted to work at exhibitions, and it was only when I suppose the previous person in the role left that role became available as being advertised. So presumably they only left when the role that they wanted, somebody left at that place. So it's kind of, it can be scarcity of roles, and that can make you competitive.
I think it was just a little bit of a lack of experience, which made it a bit difficult to sort of get in to anywhere, I suppose. I just sort of come out of university, so I had sort of the academic qualifications, I suppose, but maybe if I wanted to go into more curatorial, more working with the collection, I suppose it would have required more, perhaps continuing in academia, going on to do a master's, or doing a bit more of a kind of specific training. I do feel like I'm always learning something new. especially in my role where I work alongside a lot of other departments to help deliver these programs that we organise.
You're in the office, and then when the new exhibition opens, you're like, oh, I'll go and see that exhibition now, and sort of like spend your lunch wandering around the museum and seeing this, the cool exhibition. And then all of like the talks, that you can go to as well, that you just, I feel like I've taken those for granted for a while, because there's so many times where I've been like, oh, I'm way too busy to go to this like lunchtime talk about this or whatever. And now that I've been working at home for a year, I'm so desperate to just get back and kind of like immerse myself in it. I would say it's a really like friendly sector to work in. Like, I think people are really nice. My brother works in like cybersecurity, and it sounds awful. It just sounds like, I've heard him on the phone to his colleagues, and just the way everyone talks to each other. I think everyone in everyone in the museum is really sort of like respectful of each other, and it's just nice. It's a nice working environment.
That is a big question. I think so. I'm an assistant collections manager at the moment. So it would be nice to kind of maybe be a collections manager, so kind of manage a department essentially, and be responsible for kind of a whole department's worth of objects. But then on the other hand, obviously I love handling objects. It's fascinating and it's a real joy. But I think I would quite like to go into maybe kind of collections administration or registration. I am very much one of those people who loves planning. I love organising. I like writing itineraries. I like writing lists. I know that sounds very boring probably to most people. And I'd like to be able to kind of do that for collections, probably somewhere down the registrar's route, maybe collections coordination. I don't know, that's the thing. There's so many different roles in these museums, probably some that I haven't even heard of yet.
In 5 years' time, I actually see myself outside of the museum sector, outside of the heritage sector. And I realise that might sound a little odd, considering how much I've been singing its praises. To be completely truthful, one has to weigh up the benefits of the heritage sector, of the museum sector, with the very present truth that it does not pay well. I have enjoyed my time in the public sector. However, I cannot afford to stay in the museum, stay working for the museum for the foreseeable future. And so in the next 5 years, I will be most likely doing learning and development, which is what I'm in now, but in the private sector.
So in 5 years' time, I think I still will be working in museums. Sometimes I think about going back into education, but before having these jobs, I wouldn't have been really sure what to do if I was to study a master's. But I think now I would possibly think about doing something like museum studies. But I also think that it would be nice to maybe one day work a bit more closely with the collection in museums, work a bit more closely with objects. I still feel like I am kind of finding my feet a little bit in museums, because I've only been in this job not even for 2 years yet, and a lot of that's been through sort of lockdown and a pandemic. So I am still finding my feet a little bit, I think, and I'm still learning a lot in my current role. But I think it would be nice to one day maybe work a bit more closely with objects, collections, exhibitions, that sort of thing.
I've decided that I want to become one of those really old eccentrics that works at the museum. I want to be here for like 50 years and everyone be like, oh yeah, that's Amy, like, yeah, she's just like that. And be like one of those old people that have been there forever. That's not in 5 years, that's in like 50 years. I think I'd still like to, I want to stay, I want to stay at the museum. I guess I would see myself in the same place, but hopefully not in this bedroom, like back at the museum.
I think continuing to work on exhibition projects and other public-facing heritage projects, and I suppose in the next 5 years take on more responsibilities, learning new things, working with new people, new challenges.
I volunteered at First of a Youth in Action before this, and that formed the baseline of what I want for my career. Like, my primary goal is to go into charity administration. I love doing charity work. I love being able to work with young people and help them feel the same empowerment I felt from being able to do all the things I did at First of a Youth in Action. Like, I got to make a mental health charter that the GPs in Camden have to follow, and I got to review like sexual health clinics and the waiting rooms to see if they are young people friendly and what they needed to do to make them more friendly. Being able to make that difference just changed my outlook on everything, and that's something I definitely want to see myself like doing in the future. And obviously I want to do it in an administration capacity, and I would not be opposed to working in the museum if the opportunity came up.
It's very important that if you're thinking, whoever it is, if you're thinking about a career with museums, you need to think very carefully about if this is something you're in for the long term or in for the short term. Getting into the museum sector requires a very distinct approach. And once you're in the museum sector, it can be quite difficult to get out. It is, in museums, in the heritage sector, it's a certain way of working, it's a certain skill set, it's a certain knowledge base. And it means that the people who work in museums are very talented, very capable, wonderful employees. But moving from a museum into a private organisation, into a non-museum organisation can be a bit of a challenge. And so I think you need to ask whoever, you need to ask yourself a difficult question of, am I in it for the long term? And if so, what do I want out of it? Because obviously as you progress higher in a museum and you start getting the kind of salary that you might need to support a family, you're moving further away from the collection. And while I try to kid myself, at least because I'm learning and development for the collection, I have some interaction, but the truth is that I don't. And so to stay connected with the collection closely, it might be more difficult financially to justify a long-term career with a museum. And so it's not very romantic, but I think a number of hard-hitting practical questions about whether it's sustainable and whether it's a long-term goal is essential.
The advice I give would be to cultivate resilience. I think if you're finding that landing that first job is difficult, obviously try and get feedback and improve where you can. But it's also perfectly possible that you might not be doing anything wrong at all, and it's just competitive. You may be more than capable of doing well, and it was just a very hard pick for the employer who was sorting through the applications. So don't be disheartened if you're not immediately landing that first job. And if it's really what you want to do, don't give up.
There are so many different roles available to people, and I think the main advice that I would kind of give is go online if you can, and kind of research the different roles that there are, such as conservation or collections care or marketing, and kind of find a role which you think best suits you and kind of pursue that skill set really. And I think if you are in a position to volunteer, I think it's probably easiest if you try and volunteer at a small local museum, because often they don't have as many staff, so you get a really hands-on experience. If you can't volunteer in person, go on Twitter, because you will find amazing kind of online ways to, but virtual volunteering, basically digitization projects. I think just take any opportunity you can. Most importantly is remember that you do not have to be an expert in anything to work in museums. I know that sounds really counterintuitive. Don't kind of be intimidated by the fact that you think you have to know everything about a museum's collection, because you don't. Just go in and be interested, get as much kind of technical, practical, theoretical experience as you can, And I think that will stand you in pretty good stead, I think.
Thank you for watching. Tune in next week for our live event on how young people can get started in the museum sector.
Follow us on Instagram at BM Young People to keep up to date with the British Museum's Youth Collective.